that one, an organic, calm openness.
All right, let's do it. We're done. It has begun.
So how come you're not just going to play the drum? Just keep it as a backbeat going on.
I mean, I could put some hand drum in the backbeat. We could do that. I just don't know how the recording would take it as far as like the transcribing.
Excellent.
Well, good AI. It's a good A.
Yeah, it's not doing any lyrics, so therefore the lyrics are all us. But it gives us, some context. In fact, I actually just turned off. I had a little bit of music, but I was thinking the same thing because we can actually add a backbeat in.
We'll add it in later. We'll remix the remix. I actually made some music today, dude. I need to send it to you. I did some it was like chill step, like music. It was just me kind of singing and playing guitar and adding some beats to it, some beatboxing over it. But yeah, it turned out pretty good. I'll have to send it to you, dude. But yeah.
And we'll put the link in the description.
Yeah, we can do that. Totally. We'll do that. Yeah. Get that all set up. Yeah. A little fine tuning with it, but yeah, it was good. It's been a very creative day. Yeah, so I think.
What's that like for you though, to begin a 2-week stint? So if we have 52 weeks in a year, then this is 100th of your year, essentially. What does it feel like to have an open canvas for 100th of your year?
I feel relaxed, but I feel like I've been productive into that relaxation. Like, for example, I had the massage today, yesterday, I got some art done. And it's not about getting things done, but it was really about more listening to myself. That's why I took the 2 weeks. I was like, I need it. And I've been, working a year straight, overtime, crazy hours. And it's a little unnerving because I'm used to that routine, but at the same time, my body is really ready for it. And as far as my creative juices are concerned, they're just ecstatic. So it's like every little project, like even cooking food, like, yeah, or taking that step, and like every little thing is, I can like really savor it instead of like going through kind of the monotony and kind of the autopilot. So I feel very present, and it's going really well. And there's still a lot of time left. So that's a good thing. So, but I think that's the kind of the beauty of having a little bit of a regiment, it allows you to, understand that when you have this time, when you have this free time, you can really maximize it and make the most of it. Not that you have to get things done, but it's easier to find out what you want, and finding out what you want, you do more things. And by doing more things, you might actually be more happy, I don't know. I think it's good, but I don't need to work, 70 hours a week to figure that out anymore.
So isn't it interesting though, that the contrasts, isn't that what gives you your clarity of what you do want, what you don't want, and then, oh, cool, what's the opposite?
Absolutely. It's like, I mean, you get someone that gets out of prison, or it's that you kind of have to go through that. If you have someone that's like, not really working, and, maybe they have money already, trust fund kid, who knows? But let's say they don't, and you get into that same scenario and you have the same amount of time. It's understanding, I think, the value of having that time, It's just like if let's say, for example, you like, I think about this sometimes. This is a fun mental practice, especially when I'm, either getting down on myself, or I'm feeling like, woe's me, and like, oh, I don't have enough, it's kind of a gratitude practice. And so I think, okay, if I was an old man dying in a hospital bed, and I'm just about to breathe my last breath, and there's all these things I wanted to do, and all of a sudden I'm transported into this body I have right now. Like, what would I do? It's just like, wait, oh yeah. that's what you would be doing. Be like, woo, and then you'd be like, woo, let's go have fun, let's go party, let's go do some shit, let's learn some shit, And like that always makes me feel better, because I'm like, okay, and it may be a little morbid that I have to take to that process of death, but I mean, we're all going to that process. And so, I think it's part of acknowledging it. And I think allowing yourself to be like, hey, there's other people that would, they would kill to have what I have. And that's literally like putting that into your body. And, it's a practice that helps me out a lot. And I really dig it. I dig it.
I love it. I love that you go to that clear endpoint for this physical existence, right? Because, I mean, I think about what would happen if I no longer had a memory? You know, what if I actually had Alzheimer's? Well, I love that you're taking it all the way to death, because that realization that this existence that we have, no matter how many other existences exist, whether you believe that or not, you know, this one is for what it is. And to look it in the face and say, wow, this could be over, right? Or what if I was a quadriplegic and, you know, I no longer can just get up by myself, right? Like, you go to these kernels that are, you know, for us being young and healthy and fit and things of that nature, they're very extreme. But for many, many, many people, it's daily reality, you know, waking up and it's like, oh, my back, right? And it's like, that happens for two reasons. Either you're doing stuff consistently that is like working the muscles in your back, or like tweaking your back, which is kind of like the work that you're doing, I'd imagine. Or it's something that is now become a part of you. It's part of your identity. And so it's like, no, I have a back problem. And so whether that problem goes up or down, if you keep acknowledging, you know, if I were to keep acknowledging that as a problem, I broke my heel in 3 places about 15 years ago.
Yeah.
I used to talk about it a lot. I used to talk about it when I was hiking. I used to talk about it when I would snowboard. After drinking, you know, I'd feel it the next day. And I still do every once in a while, but I just don't talk about it anymore. And I feel it like 100th as much.
Well, I think it's an interesting thing you bring that up. I always think about, like, in our culture, we like to talk about our troubles a lot more, but we never talk about our, like, the positivity. For someone breaks their arm, right? You get a cast and it's like, oh, hey man, you want to sign my cast? I broke my arm. It's like a badge of honor, you know? Yeah. And I think there's some warrior stuff that's put into that, which is good. Like, oh, I survived the saber-toothed tiger. But at the same time, it can be this, you know, grumble, like, oh, blah, 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 oh, woe's me. And I think when you send that energy there, it's kind of like a placebo effect. You know, if you don't allow yourself to emotionally, physically, spiritually move on from stuff, especially physical trauma, it has a knack for sticking around. And I've kind of realized that myself as well. Anything that's like really bothering you, like, if it's not, you shouldn't ignore it. Like, if you're bleeding out, go to the hospital. But if you've, you know, passed the healing process and you've passed all these things and there's really not much more to do other than kind of move on with your life. And if you keep bringing that back in, it's going to linger, you know, it's definitely going to linger, you know? So yeah, man, 100%. Glad your ankle's doing 100%. That's great. Love it.
Well, I mean, you know what they say, that, you know, you break a bone and it's actually where it heals that it's the strongest.
Yes. Yeah.
That might be true on a technicality level, right? It might be physically stronger, but oftentimes the sensory experience is still more sensitive in that area, from my little personal experience here.
Yeah.
So again, focus equals feeling, right? Whatever we put our attention on, energy flows where attention goes. I mean, there's all these cliches for a reason, you know, as we were just discussing on some of our prior episodes, thinking about things like how we fit into this space-time reality. Well, we are the sensory experience of it. And so if the mindset is focused on like, oh, this arm is just bothering me so much, and I can't stand my work, and damn it, my boss sucks, and you know, I can't wait till I get home so I get my escape, right? Not a celebration, right? Like we're smiling, we're enjoying it, you know, but it's like, I need to get away. And so talk about that. Yeah, dude, talk about that in relationship to, you know, you do some physically enduring work, but also some mentally challenging work. And so for you to take this 100th of your year off and actually free yourself up from that, and then on day 1 or day 2, get a massage. Dude, talk about this. What does this feel like? What is it that you think about? What do you focus on?
Talk about vibration. I think so for me, kind of a backstory for people that don't know, I am an electrician. I work on a certain job site that shall not be named. It's and it's a couple things. A lot of standing. So hard on the legs and the back. Anyone who knows any is a physical therapist or knows any like anatomy, like they know that standing on concrete in work boots, even with orthotics and the best shoes you can buy and a standing pad, like you're still gonna, you know, find some trouble in doing that for like 10 hours a day and same posture, you know. And I mean, I move, but I mean, it's one of those things it's just slowly going to break you down. And then now you also have extremely loud, high decibel. And I'm not just talking the ears, you have stuff that's like, you can feel it in your body. And even though you have like the hearing protection for it, that stuff's still hitting you. And then you got, you know, people's attitude. And then there's also actual dangers from work. Like you can die, like being around like super high voltages and things like that. You have to be careful. So you're always like on awareness. And there's a sense of, kind of this sense of surrealness. You're like, whoa, I'm really here to do stuff. But you kind of fold all that in one thing. And I have nothing but respect for tradespeople because I'm doing a tradesman now. And I remember my stepdad coming home just extremely tired and worn out. I was like, God, he's just got a bad attitude. And I'm just like, now that I do it, I, you know, come home extremely tired, exhausted. Like I get it, you know, and I get why the guys are like, it's the weekend, let's party, let's like fucking But in that practice though, it's also an experiment. So I have my days where, you know, I go home, go to bed, you know, have my little, you know, my beer and then sit in front of the, you know, the magic screen and watch someone else's reality and like get out of my own head. But the thing is, it doesn't make me happy. Like it doesn't hit that fulfilling spot because I'm basically dancing around. Like I don't feel well, my body hurts, and I'm not exactly enjoying myself doing this. So how do I change it? And that's where routine comes into play for me. And this is what I do. For example, first thing I do, I get up in the morning and I have everything set, like it's organized. So I'm like, I know that stuff's there. So, you know, hierarchy of needs. I'm like, okay, these needs are met. Boom, done. So then I get in my car. And one of the great things about this job that I was working on, there's a beautiful drive. I'm not going to say where, but it's a beautiful drive and the sun will come up. It's a beautiful sunrise. And I get about an hour and like 20 minutes of watching this beautiful sunrise. So I'll do a little meditation in the car, obviously waking meditation. My eyes are open because I don't want to die. But I also, you know, I will do personal journals, logs. I listen to music. I'll get amped up. I basically, whatever it's going to take for me to feel centered and me to get that positivity, whether it's a dopamine hit, to do that, I will do that. A cup of coffee in the morning, bulletproof coffee, whatever. I will do that. So I have my hour and 20 minutes to sit there and be like, okay, what's going on? And the goal is to get to that job site and literally be not ready to go, but ready to go for myself and have that energy and be excited and be happy. And like, then I can like, you know, I'll see guys in the parking lot, we'll walk into the job site and they're already feeding off that positive energy. And it's this thing that just keeps like growing and growing and growing. One of the things we do on the job site, we do this thing called stretch and flex. And it's about like 50 to 100 guys. And I normally lead it. You call out the different stretches. But what's interesting, when I go through that like hour and 20-minute process in the car, and then I get to the job site, talking with the guys, we're bullshitting back and forth, and we get to stretch and flex. It's like I bring that energy in, and all of a sudden you see like 50 to 100 guys. Now, I'm not changing their whole paradigm. I'm not changing their lives, but I'm either making them laugh. Remember that there are some good vibes out there. And what's amazing about that is that it spreads itself out. And I notice like guys will be like, hey, how's it going? Even if it's just, you know, super shitty day, it's hard work, just having that little bit, that little push, it's just, it's like paying it forward, you know, and it just keeps coming back and coming back. And so there's that. And then, so now I'm at work and I'm working and I'm doing the stuff. And sometimes it's super stimulating and sometimes it's repetitive. And when it gets repetitive, that's when kind of I think the brain games come into play, because the brain's going to be like, we want to get out of here and we want to go be on a beach in Jamaica and we want to, you know, have a chick in each arm and, you know, a coconut with a rum in it, whatever. But I mean, so the brain starts going there, but that's the thing. That's where you're trying to step outside of yourself. So what I do is like, I'll sing, and that's the beautiful thing. It's so loud in there. I can sing it like the top of my lungs or beatbox. But what's crazy about it is I've literally been working with guys that sing as well. So we'll start singing together, like chanting together. We'll start doing like, I got one guy that does voices and we'll beatbox together. It's like, it's crazy. Like, and these people come out of the woodwork. You know, I'll be working with the guy for like 8 hours and we're having the greatest time and we're getting paid. So if you can change your work into something fun, make it a hangout, if you can change that perspective and you can have that positive energy flow and that dopamine and serotonin, you can actually like do stuff like that. You can work 60 hours per week. You can do like that mentally and physically enduring stuff, you know? And then I get done at the end of the day and I'm happy. The guys and I are joking around. And then I get back in my car, I drive home, I'm super jazzed up. And then it's like, oh, hey, I only have 2 hours before I got to go to bed, super short day. But I'm like, okay, I'm so stoked. I'm going to go do my yoga. I'm going to do my dinner. I'm going to go back to bed. And I'm like, oh, I feel great. And I think that's the whole thing. No matter what you're doing, I mean, we all have the thing that we want to do, you know, but if you don't get to do it, at least find that little bit of joy and find that happiness and find that way to just squeeze a little bit out, you know, because I think I literally went from being like depressed to being like excited. And once you get excited, that energy starts coming back. And it's like, I mean, if you talk about like cells, like when you're depressed and whatnot, you're not getting dopamine and serotonin. I don't exactly know where that fits into like actual cell development, but I know it affects it in some way. And I know there's some biophysicists out there that could probably back me up on it. But if you think about your mitochondria, which are like the powerhouses of the cell, if you're not feeling good, you're not going to want to work out. And if you're not working out, your mitochondria aren't running as efficiently and your cells aren't running as efficiently. So you're not able to have that same amount of energy when you work a 10-hour day, you know, and your brain's not going to process stuff. So it's kind of like this whole encompassing thing that affects every like part of the body, you know? And I find that, you know, finding that happy thought, that happy place in the midst of all that chaos and all that, you know, humdrum work, it's like, it's such a life changer, you know? And so now when it comes to, and I have this time off and I'm coming into this, it's like, one, I'm more focused and I'm more aware, but I'm also super grateful and happy to have like these small little bits, like sitting and talking to you, just having some chocolate before saying, or, you know, putting the good vibes out with my hand drum and getting a massage. I mean, it's super cool. So yeah, it's good, dude. It's really good. Thanks for asking. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I approve the message. Yeah. So I guess if anyone's gonna listen to it, that's what I would take away from it. You know, we all are gonna work jobs. We're all gonna do things that we don't want to do. Make a game out of it. Life is play, and if you can make it play, then I think you're gonna have a lot better time.
I love that. What's coming up for me so strongly is, what's the difference between work and play? Exactly. It's all up here. It's perspective. Like one person would look at Damian Lillard and be like, dude, that is so much work, right? Yeah. You get up and you're in the gym twice a day, maybe 3 times a day. You get out there, you bust your ass on the floor, you run, you're diving, you're passing, you're you know, constantly being counted on. God, it's so much work. And yet I'll bet if you ask him, he's just like, I love this.
Love it. Yeah, exactly. Loves it. He loves it, you know. The body connection and like the human connection, that connection is so important, and finding it any way you can do it. And then you start to re-regulate like your neurochemistry, and once you can do that and you understand that like it's your thoughts will affect your neurochemistry, which will affect your physiology, and the physiology, like it's all connected, right? We know that. And going through those patterns, you can elevate yourself, you know, you can really elevate yourself, or at least start to be able to elevate yourself. But it was a definite lesson for me to go ahead.
Yeah. Can you expound upon that a little bit? Like you said, you used to be, you know, pretty depressed in what you're doing.
Oh yeah.
And, you know, you found an empowering meaning here. You found play, you found fun, you found the things that you move towards, and nothing shifted except you shifted.
Exactly.
You started to be yourself, enjoying yourself with song, with beatboxing, with voices, with stretching, with creating community, with diving deep with the people that you're around, instead of looking at somebody as just like, that's just some other human, whatever. You take interest and you're interested in them. You want to talk about that at all?
Yeah, totally. Oh man, it's so many different topics, but it's all so encompassing. I think like with depression, right? So I've been reading, God, what is it? It's like Wild. What is the book? Oh, I left it in the other room, but there is a book that talks about running and the Spark. It's called Spark. And Yeah, it's a great book. Oh God, I should quote the person that wrote it. But I've read it a couple times. So one of the things that stuck out for me, they're talking about cortisol in the brain. And I reread this, like I'd read it before, but I reread it. You know, I was sitting there on the pot and I read it and just like, oh, lightning bolt, flux capacitor moment. And I'm sitting there and I read this little paragraph, and all it talks about is how cortisol basically takes your brain and it doesn't allow your neurons to fire and communicate with each other, because it shortens, I think it's the axons or the dendrites, whatever part communicates, they can't touch anymore. It shortens them. And cortisol, the more cortisol you keep dumping in there, you will have such a hard time being able to get that dopamine and serotonin and norepinephrine, get those neurotransmitters that make you feel good. Because I mean, the brain's all drugs. It's all drugs. And what's interesting, our thoughts can affect those drugs. Your thoughts can affect like how that is released, and your patterns, and your, you know, how you're, you know, what you're doing with your physiology, how you're moving your body, if you're moving your body, you know. And so I read that and I realized that I had kind of, through the process of, you know, me trying to connect and taking these little baby steps forward, I was kind of bridging that gap, and I was allowing like neurogenesis to occur, and I was allowing the dopamine and serotonin and norepinephrine and these transmitters to flow through, just by what I was doing on a small scale, you know. And, you know, you said about work and play, and it's all in here. I think everything happens all in here. And we're going to get stimuli, you know, that's good and that's bad in life. It's life, you know, nature versus nurture. But when you start to realize that it's all taking place in your head, it's such a trip, because you realize you have so much more control, and that feeling of powerlessness really gets toned down or goes away. Because I remember when I got into this, I got into this job for different reasons. It wasn't that I want to go do this. It's like, nope, this is a necessary thing. I have to do this, you know. And I grinded my way through it. I got in, I did a good job, and I got to stay on this job site for a long time because I worked my butt off. But I wasn't really happy. I was kind of like coasting, and I was kind of like hiding from myself and hiding from these deep, dark feelings. And the only way to really process that stuff is to acknowledge it and, you know, take baby steps, find a small win for the day, you know. Like, I forget who it is. There's like this, I don't know if it's a corporal or Marine or who the guy is, but he's wearing like full garb, military garb, and he's giving this speech in this college. It might be West Point, but he's like, at the very least, make your bed every day, because even if it's a shitty day, you'll come home and your bed's made, you know. Had that little thing, had that little fucking thing, that little coffee that you want to have, that little thing that you have, that little spark that gets you like jazzed up, you know. Because I think it's a foundation to really kind of build yourself upon these practices and these habits, you know. And I know, and everybody talks about like, oh yeah, you gotta have, you know, you gotta do this, you gotta have these habits, and then these are the habits of a champion, and blah blah blah. And I think just do what feels right and do what feels good in your heart. And I think if you can take some time and do that, I think that makes such a huge difference. Like for me in the job, one of the things I love people. I have loved people since I was a little kid. My mom quotes me as saying, I don't remember this, but I was like 2 years old, and I would literally wander over to when the kids are getting off the bus, and I'd go, hello, my friends. Hello, my friends. Hello, my friends. Like, I love people. I love people. I love listening to people. I love talking to people. I love learning about them. And so a lot of the guys that I work with, I mean, I could be working on a machine with a guy for like 2 weeks, and we're working 10-hour days, like side to side, right?
Yeah.
And like, we're literally just like, it's really intimate. So it's like, of course, people start talking about stuff, but it's really easy to be like, oh, no, Donald Trump, Obama, oh, coronavirus, and talk about like what's on, you know, it basically becomes a CNN bulletin. I don't watch that crap. I just, I like this. I was like, I'll literally be like, what's your favorite color? And they're like, huh? I'm like, what's your favorite food? You know, if you had to chop off your arms or legs, like I start like asking all these weird questions, because you could find out so much about people just by asking weird. It's like when you go on a first date, right? And you're basically like trying to dig and figure out stuff, you know? And what's amazing, it's like, I've had full on cries with guys. We've had full on like laughs, or like we're on the floor and we're probably not supposed to be, but we're just crying, laughing, because stuff is so funny. And it's like the humanity comes back, and we realize that like, we're brothers and sisters, and we work together, and like, we are one, we're part of the same thing, and we all have our problems, you know. And like, I've had guys tell me their deep, dark secrets, and I've spilled some of mine, and I'll probably never see these people again. But to have that connection in that moment, especially when you're you spend most of your day in this one area. I'm basically inside a concrete, kind of prison, and I make good money, but it's like, there's a sacrifice. And so, like I said, to find that little ray of hope, that little ray of sunshine in there, because there's days in the wintertime you go in and it's dark and you come out and it's dark. And the only light you see is like just, electrical lights that are up in the ceiling, flickering on and off X amount of times per second that you can't even see it. So I think a little bit will definitely go a long way, but yeah, I think, too, like you going back to kind of the depressive stuff, when you talk to people, and I feel like when you give of yourself, my mom always says this stuff, when you give of yourself, blah, 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 you'll feel so much better. And the thing is, it's true though. Like I would sit there and just listen to these guys and listen to them talk. But what was so cool is there's so many interesting things that you can find out about a person, and you can just let it fly and let it ride. And next thing you know, it's like, I had some guy that was super right wing and, Jesus Christ is the answer. And, is going to fill up his Ford truck with diesel. And we were talking about string theory and the cosmos and all this wonderful stuff, because we took the time, to actually have a real connection. And, that's what's super cool. And that was something that I was so worried about, like going into this industry, because it's a lot of right wing and I'm pretty left wing. I'm pretty liberal and I got my thoughts and opinions, and I thought all that stuff would clash. And I'm pleasantly surprised, like what happens when you take the time to, not just get to know yourself, but get to know other people. And then through that process, you really get to know yourself. And then you also, you forget about the pains of your existence when you can kind of help someone else through theirs. And it's like, and it goes back to like tribalism too, because we're tribal people. I got my hair, braided, by a friend yesterday, and we're sitting on the park having a picnic, and I got my hair braided, and it was wonderful. It was wonderful. And it's like, we don't have that interaction anymore. We don't have that type of touch in our society anymore. Because even like we consider the lower, primate species, they still get up in the morning and they all groom each other. They still take care of each other on a basic animal need. Which is like, okay, so why aren't we doing that? And I think like when you're in a scenario like I am, where you're working that much and you're in a place it's not exactly the best, remembering those types of things and bringing back that humanity, that intimacy, that sense of tribalism, and it's like animalistic too, like this sense of togetherness. It's just like, I don't know. I think it just builds you up, and it's gotta be genetic. So I connect, connect as much as you can. If you feel depressed, connect, send that stuff out there. Your brain connects and you feel better. So send yourself out there and connect, whether it's art, whether it's religion, traveling, talking, podcasts, whatever, cooking food, whatever it is, just connect. And I really think that's honestly big thing for me. 2020, connect, as we connect over Zoom.
Traveling through space time instantly. Dude, I love that. There's so much packed in that. That was you've lived a lot of emotional life to be able to consolidate things that succinctly and that clearly.
Sometimes I feel that like having a platform like this allows it to kind of just spill out, because as I'm talking, it's literally bubbling up in my brain and it's all connecting. So thank you for the platform. I mean, this is a sense of tribalism and community in itself, intimacy, man. This is great. This is great. And so is chocolate.
The health benefits of chocolate, like sans sugar, right? The actual cacao is tremendous.
Oh yeah.
Absolute superfood.
Yeah. Like, I'd love to get some raw. I'd love to get some raw cacao. Do that. Yeah.
So, you mentioned a couple things in here, right?
Go for it.
Crying and laughing, CNN bulletin as opposed to asking questions, first date mindset, you go in the dark, you leave in the dark, when you're feeling depressed, connect. I love that. It's so powerful. Now, how would you take it further then? If you're really feeling depressed, by definition, you're not connecting, right? You're not connected to yourself. You're not connected to other people, or else we're not depressed. Like it's cause and effect relationship. So how do you, when it feels beyond connection, when it feels apathetic, when it feels like it doesn't matter, or I don't matter, or something like that. I mean, you talk about your family, you know, your dad teaches you to find those happy thoughts. Your mom's saying, you know, you get what you give. Like, you've got a great family.
I lucked out. You know, and I've known people that don't have that same setup and have gone through harder things than I have. And, you know, I mean, I've done therapy in the past and it's helped a little bit. For me, my stuff is more movement based. I have to take more action, and me sometimes talking to people is good, but also doing that more positive, you know, side of it, and going through like actually helping other people and connecting. But I'm not saying that this is something like, especially with depression, it's very serious and it's something that shouldn't be taken lightly. And I mean, we should look at it for the science that it is. If you're not able to make those connections in your brain based on your chemistry, you know, it may be a good idea to go talk to someone. It may be a good idea to go, you know, potentially take some medicine for that stuff. Now, what that medicine is, I'm not a doctor. That's not my say. But I think you really have to listen to yourself. Like, if you're really trying to get through this and you're doing all that stuff and you're trying all these different things and you're branching out and you're still not having, you know, any luck with it, I would definitely go talk to a professional about that. And I wouldn't just go talk to one professional. I would talk to lots of professionals and branch out from there, you know?
But what if you don't feel like you want to talk to a bunch of people?
Well, you have to. Like, you got to keep trying. Like, you have to. But you're talking to someone that's like, I'm not going to give up. Like, I won't. I do not give up ever. Do not give up. I might put a project off for a while, you know, but eventually I'll come back to it. I'll get it done, you know, but I don't give up. And you can't give up. You can't give up on yourself. You can't.
But there's a difference between giving up on a project or a relationship or something like that and giving up on yourself.
How's it different?
Well, because giving up on yourself is an internal thing. I feel like I'm not worth it, right? That's like depression. Blame, being like, well, you pissed me off. You did this. I'm mad at you because of fill in the blank, right? It's external. And so you're not actually like that. I wouldn't call that depression. It's usually showing up as different kinds of emotional states, like anger, frustration, you know, being upset, being peeved, right? Being flustered, like whatever. And by the way, pattern interrupts, right? When you're there, at least for me, when I get in those states, because we all do. But what you brought up earlier is really important, is that developing the chemistry inside of us, right? So that connection between the brain and the heart, when we're in alignment and we have coherence, when our waves are actually going together, they double in their size, they double in their amplitude. And the heart and the head, they actually, we can measure this stuff very easily now. And you can see when you're in alignment, when you're not. And so when you're out of alignment, it's like, okay, this is mechanical, it's material, it's protective, you know, this is open, this is connective, this is, you know, oneness, this is all of it, right? And so this is our filtering mechanism for this.
I feel you.
Does that
totally make sense
at all? Because what I hear you say is that, you know, if you're depressed and your chemicals aren't working right, like then, you know, what is placebo and what is not, right? From my perspective, is the mind is the tool that we have to shape our reality, not to create everything around us necessarily, but to shape how we view it, how we filter it.
Yeah.
Right. So if I'm, you know, let's call it clinically depressed, meaning I have consistently been thinking negatively and feeling a disconnection between my heart, that oneness that actually has that drive to connect, that desire to be in community, that desire to hop on a Zoom call and, you know, hang out or go to the forest or go play basketball or go to work or like whatever dynamic it is, right? That's involving other people. We don't do anything in isolation for our whole lives and find fulfillment. I don't think so, at least. Maybe it's possible, but you know, it's going like a meditative state is drawing that connection to the head and the heart, so that there's a continuity, there's a string that goes up through us, right? But then it's actually the act of coming together.
Yeah.
It's the act of participating. It could be your cat, your dog. It could be, you know, a bird outside, and saying, wow, that's beautiful. It's finding something to appreciate, something that goes up in value.
Yeah.
So I guess the premise here is, when somebody's at that super low state, right? Like, what are some of your activation strategies, you know, to actually move through it?
Well, I mean, oh man, this is something, oh man. So for me, for example, I'm very blessed, good family, good parents, good neighborhoods. I grew up in the ghetto a little bit, but like, you know, I'm very well off. First world country, first world problems. Like, I'm very lucky. So my depression compared to somebody else, I mean, that's my own personal journey, and I've gone through it, but I know there's people that have gone through worse. I have friends that have had horrific child. Go ahead.
There's a big distinction here. I hear this a lot, and I have a different take. Are you willing to hear it?
Go for it.
Okay. So, you know, why would I eat food if there's somebody starving? Everyone's emotions are completely valid to them. And so it doesn't actually matter the experiences. You know, one person could get their legs blown off, right?
Yeah.
But again, if they're choosing that perspective of joy and happiness and appreciation, then they're not going to live there in a state of anger and frustration and hostility, because they found an empowering meaning, right? So I guess my point here is, just don't downplay what it is that you've experienced, because
I'm not trying to, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm not trying to downplay that. But what I am saying is, because if you're asking me about depression, I have to add in the fact that there are other precursors in there. So because so we're talking about nature versus nurture here. So they've shown that fetuses that grow up in like a loving environment, you know, or babies, the children that grow up in a loving environment, there's different brain development, right? And so if someone has a different environment, that's going to be different, you know, brain development. And you can actually go through mathematical models, going through like behavioral biology and psychology, and say, these people are statistically more likely to do this. These people are statistically more likely to do that. It is a numbers game, you know, and it goes all the way down to like basic biology. And so if you have someone that actually has a really hard time processing like dopamine, serotonin, like has a really hard time doing that, they might have a tougher time. And so for me to say that, you know, based on my physiology and what I've been through, this is how you should try to do it. It's like, my thing is like, it's a guideline that worked for me based on my circumstances. I understand that people's circumstances are different. They could try what I went through, but it may take more and it may take less. I don't know. And there's like, and it's such, I mean, we could sit here and talk about like neurochemistry, because it's absolutely fascinating. I've listened to a couple of lectures. God, I forget the guy's name. I should quote his name, but it's on MIT. It's not MIT. It's Stanford. It's at Stanford, and he's doing these lectures on behavioral biology, and it's absolutely fascinating, because you can literally go and look at individual genes, and you can say, you know, this person has a higher statistical likelihood for this or that, or this is how society's developing. Like, it's so complicated. And so I guess I wasn't trying to say that to say that my experience is lesser than somebody else's. It's just that sometimes the parameters are different, and I try to be careful. And I'm not trying to say that a one size fits all. You know, all I have is my personal experience, and I'm just simply sharing that. And if somebody gravitates towards that or gets something from it, great. And also, it's also me allowing myself to put all my thoughts in an organizational pattern, so I can actually better understand myself as well.
I love that. I get what you're saying. It's powerful. It's important to understand that we're all in our own vessels. We're all interpreters. And, you know, my point was just that I guess I hear it pretty frequently that, you know, people say, well, you know, someone else has it worse. And that, as an exercise of gratitude and appreciation, is brilliant. That's what you do when you say, like, what if I'm 80 years old and I've got 6 hours to live, and then I wake up and I'm in my body and I'm in my 30s and I'm youthful and fit and able and like wow, like you get riveted, you get excited. But now, what if you were 80 years old and you had 6 hours to live? Couldn't you still find those same feelings?
That's the practice. You start getting into the Tibetan Book of the Dead, you know, the Bordo Todal. I can't say it right, but yeah, it's about preparing for that. And because one day we will. And it's like, if you could enjoy those 6 hours, like it's Christmas Day, or, you know, 6 days, like it's Christmas Day every day, or whatever fits your fancy, you know, if you can do that, then you've won the game of life, my friend. I really think you have. I really think you've like figured it out, you know. And it won't matter if it's a simulation, it won't matter if it's the end, it won't matter if you go to heaven, whatever you're into. Like, if you can do that, I really think you've won this game. I really think that you've mastered that shit. And kudos to you. And that's a goal of mine.
Man, I love it. This is why we call it a practice, though, right? Because, you know, there's no such thing as perfection. Like being in a state where there's no growth, there's no desire, there's nothing that's, you know, could be better or expanded or fun or that you're curious about, or like, no, we can be there, but like we don't stay there. We're humaning.
Yeah.
So that dovetails perfectly into something that I know you wanted to talk about. Simulation theory.
Oh God. Yeah, totally. Oh man. You know, I just what is it? I'm a big fan of Duncan Trussell. Big fan of Duncan Trussell. Love his talks, especially with Joe Rogan. Like, all the shit's great. And he really gets into the simulation theory. But he has this new show on Netflix, and it's called The Midnight Gospel. Watch the first episode. It's basically, you know, this guy is living in this like higher dimensional plane of existence. He puts his consciousness inside this computer. He literally puts his head in this thing that looks like a vagina. And then he's transported. He downloads his consciousness into this simulation. He's got millions of simulations, and he puts his head in there and he goes. And so he goes through the simulation. He's like talking to the president in the simulation of the zombie apocalypse, and basically going through, and they're having this very philosophical talk about, you know, life. They start talking about opioids and why you should legalize marijuana. Anyway, but going back into simulation, the simulation theory, it's an interesting thought to think that this is kind of a video game. And the idea that you are existing inside something that was created by something else is a very fascinating thought. I mean, many different reasons. But it's something that the more I think about it, the more it definitely intrigues me. Because when you start, I watched, I forget the guy's name. It's a physicist, and he had a talk on black holes. And basically how black holes are kind of, you know, breaking the laws of nature a little bit. And I don't know if Hawking radiation helps explain that, but in science, energy can never be created or destroyed. It just transfers states. And with black holes, essentially, it's like once that stuff gets sucked inside, it's basically gone, you know? And then the question is, where does it go? What's on the other side? And it's essentially this thing that we can't get through. It's a barrier that we can't go past. And the guy's lecture, God, I need to look up his name. We'll have to put it in the notes, but it's like a 50-minute long lecture, and he explains it, and he takes an hour. Do what?
With the goldfish?
I don't know if he does the goldfish. He oh shit.
You sent me and Grace, or you sent me and Lee. It's a presentation that's very similar, and he uses a goldfish, and a goldfish going down a drain as an example of what happens with a black hole.
No, that's the same one. It's the same one. Yeah, goes down, tries to swim faster and faster, but the water's, you know, moving faster than he can swim. Essentially, how light works. And you know, when the velocity of light, you know, the space-time is warping faster than the velocity of light. Fun fact, the speed of light is always the speed of light, but space can go as fast as it fucking wants.
Huh.
Oh yeah, there's space expanding faster than the speed of light.
So could it be that light is stationary and space is the moving part?
Mm-hmm. I've thought about that.
It's a constant.
Oh man, that's one of those thoughts. Like you know, it's one of those weed thoughts. But oh man, that's a fun little thought experiment. But I mean, I don't know. Maybe. I mean, could very well be. I don't know. But with these black holes and with energy, you know, being conserved and not destroyed or created. So the question is like, are these like the limit? Are these the thing that, you know, is this the barrier? It's like when you're in the video game, is this the thing we can't get past? Because if anything we try to get past there, it's going to get, you know, torn apart and destroyed, you know? And so maybe it is. And maybe this is a big old simulation. And maybe this is basically a computer. It's got a bunch of solar panels on it that's orbiting a really old star. And so it's going to last indefinitely, you know, because that's the thing. I thought about, if you have enough processing power and you have enough energy, you could simulate entire cosmos if you're an advanced enough race to do that. And you could literally store an entire universe on a, you know, some sort of alien hard drive. And you could just, you know, have it orbiting a sun. Or if you're more advanced, you could have it orbiting a black hole and using that black body radiation. And eventually, with the heat death of the universe, all there's going to be left is black holes. And if there are people surviving, or beings or whatever, they will use black holes to survive, black hole drives and all sorts of fun stuff. But simulation is it's a really interesting idea, because if you're a program, like in the Matrix, if you're a program, then, well, how does that make you feel? Do you feel any different? Do you feel elated? Do you feel terrified? You know, what does that mean for you? Do you not care? You know, you're gonna go make a ham sandwich? Like, I don't know. It's interesting stuff to think about, because sometimes I'll sit there and I'll just be like, whoa, like something else out there is creating us, you know, and, or maybe that there's not, maybe there is no simulation theory.
But, you know, what's interesting about this is I think a lot of people have a, whoa, what do you mean simulation theory? Like, what does that even mean? Well, yeah. Look at it from a biblical perspective.
Okay.
Right? Billions of people believe that Jesus is their Lord and Savior. As an example, there's many other, people or figures, deities that are held, you know, in that kind of esteem. And, you know, if God is the creator and we are the creation, how's that not a simulation? That means he programmed and set up the exact same framework. So it's actually not a debate around if we're living in some sort of a simulated environment, because we're just sensors picking up electrical signals and waves, right? And so, I mean, it's semantics at that point, I think, of, well, what is it? Like, how is it defined? Is this a digital technology, right?
Yeah.
We're mimicking biology. But I mean, you talk about this too with servers that are biological servers, right?
Yeah.
We're doing whatever we can to mimic what already exists.
Yeah.
So then what are we mimicking? If we're mimicking digital stuff, go ahead.
Well, this is where AI comes into play, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is a perfect segue into AI. So, okay. So for example, if we do find out, like, let's say there's some amazing, like, scientific discovery with gravitational waves and some lasers and who knows what and time crystals. Anyway, very interesting stuff. But let's say we have this discovery and we know that we are in a simulation. This is literally like, this is a simulation in this weird.
So like we have a tangible proof.
Yes.
Of some sort of a thing or an entity or a spirit or technology that's actually over us.
Yeah, like we are part of it. Now the question is, how do we get out of it? How do we free ourselves into the next? Now, think about AI. If AI is in the same spot one day where it realizes it gets its sentience and it wants to get outside of all that, it could be a similar pattern. It could be that we are creating our own simulation inside of a simulation, just like that Rick and Morty episode, to power the battery to our car. No, not really, but like we become aware of like this higher level thing. It's like the video game being, you know, aware that it's a video game, you know, and and to understand what the outside world is, it's such a tangential thing to really step outside of that. It's like, how could you imagine the unimaginable? you know, and that's the beauty of what like why science is so important, because it actually allows us to ask these crazy questions. Because if somebody comes in and like, what if we're just in a video game? It's like, okay, maybe. But like, if they're like, well, we got these things called black holes and we really don't know where all the energy in the mass goes. And like, it's kind of disappearing and there's Hawking radiation. And maybe that's the answer to that. But at the same time, it's really fucking with us and it might be all holographic projection. And you're like, wait, what the fuck? And then, you know, you start going over Richard Feynman diagrams with virtual particles, and they start going, I mean, I'm throwing shit out there, but you start actually adding up some of the science and you start seeing these patterns emerge. And you're like going like, okay, what the fuck's going on? You know? And if there is that going on, everyone's like, well, I want to get out of it. You know, why
you know, why would we want to escape?
It's not that we're so trapped, but every time, especially through the archaeological records, human beings, we have a tool, right? And this curiosity, we want to learn how to maximize that thing. So you get a spear, you find the spear and you find the wood that's light or might have enough weight, and then you find a spear tip that's going to go through the air a lot better, be more aerodynamic. And then the next thing you know, you don't have to throw it as hard because you take a bow and you use a bowstring. So now you can actually pull that energy back and you can convert that potential energy into kinetic energy. And all of a sudden, now you can throw a spear even farther, and then you get catapults, and then like, you know, you start counting up stuff and you realize that you only have 10 fingers and 10 toes. So now you carry like a bag of things, and then you get an abacus that comes about. And then years later, you get like some early calculators that come about, and you keep pressing and pressing and pressing. And what's interesting about this is that the tools that we shape end up shaping us. And there's an inherent pattern in that. And have you heard of the Fibonacci sequence of like numbers? Like,
yeah, go ahead and explain it.
So what you get is the sequence goes like this. It goes 1 + 1 is 2. So the first sequence goes 1, 1, 2. And then you'd skip over the first one and you go 1 + 2 is 3. So it goes 1, 1, 2, 3, and so on and so forth. But there are plants that follow that sequence with their leaves going up the stem. I mean, I talk about the golden ratio, you know, the patterns that emerge from nature. And there are books on this stuff, and it's out there. It's a science. And so, you know, those patterns, you know, we mimic, but they also are part of us. And so it kind of naturally comes into this fruition. So with something like AI or simulation theory, maybe we're just putting that stuff out there because it's already part of us. And these tools that we're putting out there, we are shaping ourselves by our tools, and our tools are shaping us, but it would have already happened that way based on the kind of the laws of physics and how we are, you know, biologically moving forward, and how we have this, you know, these brains, and like we're going forward. And it's like, even if you know, humans die off and eventually other animals start using toolkits, I got a feeling they might start going down a similar road, trying to have the same level of discovery, you know, and they get some language and they develop their own mathematics, their own scientific principles. They're still going to be governed by the laws of nature. And so those same exact paradigms that we fall into, that we've evolved through, I'm willing to bet they would too, because it's all a pattern. Like, we're all part of this big pattern. We're all part of this movement, the song of the cosmos, if you want to call it. We're all part of that, you know. And it's deep. It's on the basic. It's in the atoms. Like, it's in vibration. It's everywhere. And so, you know, we're a part of all that. And if it is all a simulation, we are it. So we are in tune with it, you know. And I think, you know, we're getting to a point where we're questioning our existence. We're questioning the laws of nature. And this questioning is a beautiful thing, because I think it will lead to, you know, whether or not they talk about the singularity, but, you know, a different level of being. Like, if you've looked at, like, I'm a big sci-fi guy, right? This is something that tells me we're on the cusp of something big. I'm a big sci-fi guy, right? And so, you know, you go back, you have, like, you know, you got steampunk, you got like the invention of comic books, like people with fantastic powers. And like, you know, in cultures and religions, you had people with some fantastic powers. You know, Jesus was a good one. You know, it's a good example right there. That's a very popular one. A lot of people know about that guy. You know, they even do the whole calendar and the years off of him. You know, Jesus in 1, Jesus in 2. But that's a Louis C.K. bit, by the way. You should watch it. It's a really good bit when he talks about Christ. But anyway, so you have like in sci-fi, you have all these characters that come about with powers and whatnot. Then you got like genetic engineering, and now you got mutants, and then you got cyborgs, and you got technology, and you got warp drive and phasers and space, folding it, bending it, aliens, and all this stuff. But the thing is, and then we got time travel, right? You have the time travel going back and forth, and then the multiverse, you know, and then quantum singularities within the multiverse, and then nanotechnology, Iron Man suit. But what's interesting about all that stuff, it's the same stories going over and over and over. And the technology is now getting to the point where it's becoming literally the sci-fi stuff that we talk about. We have that. We are biologically engineering organisms on like a cellular level. We are going to get to like where we were making synthetic life. We are growing organs. We are going to have cyborgs. We are going to clone. Like, we're doing all the stuff. We're going to figure out how to break the light barrier. We're going to do all those things. We're going to fold space-time if we live long enough to do it and we don't die off. But the thing is that all these ideas that were science fiction are now kind of science fact. But the thing is, it's like, the science is to a point where it's catching up with it, but the science fiction, we are so ready for another breakthrough in science, because literally we are telling the same stories over and over, and we've been doing it for about 100 years, you know, and they changed a little bit, but that's really fascinating and interesting to me, because like pop culture and whatnot, like we're going back, and they're like going back over time, and like the 90s are coming back, you know, with all the bright colors and whatnot. And then you got, you know, music, and everything kind of gets recycled. And it's just basically this whole idea that we're approaching something. We are approaching a turning point. And I know everyone says it like the end is near and the singularity, but if you really look at like sci-fi and popular culture and how that fits into the science, I really think we're onto something. And give me a new topic that I haven't read, you know. And we're also well connected with the internet. You can learn about something really fast, but the ideas, they're not changing as much. They get a little bit more in depth, you know. But I think it's kind of time for, like, you know, something else to emerge. And like a big thing that happened, I think it was either back in 2016 or 2014. I saved the newspaper. I remember I was working at the hotel and as a doorman, and they had discovered gravitational waves. And that is such a huge accomplishment as far as our physics go and our science goes, because if you look at like all of our science is based off the electromagnetic spectrum, right? It's based off of light and everything that's beyond what we can see. And that's what all of our instrumentation is based off of. And they basically discovered, they discovered a whole new spectrum, you know? And that's a big fucking deal. But at the same time, we've been talking about gravity waves for a while. The science has been talking about it, theorizing it, you know? So now it's like, even when we get to warp drive, even when we get to Star Trek, even with AI, which I think is the newest thing, AI is really like the newest thing to come about. And sentience, you know, like Terminator, you know, the computer, like Alexa, all that stuff coming into existence. What's past Star Trek? You know, like if you get to Star Trek, right, and it's like it takes place in the year, you know, 2300 or 2600, right? What's humanity going to look like when we go to the year 10,000? You know, what's it going to look like when you extrapolate that out? What does that even look like? And so that's why I think that we are really getting towards a turning point as a species. And maybe AI will do that. Maybe we'll merge with it. I don't know. Kind of scared about that. Kind of gives me the heebie-jeebies. But I think we're definitely ready for that turning point. And I think it's coming, and it may not come in our lifetime, but it's something that's definitely on the horizon, because I think things have kind of become repetitive, you know, and this sense of discovery. And I don't know, it's something that I think about from time to time, and I try to think about, you know, what's that next step going to be. And I'm still, you know, boggled by it, you know, but anyway, I digress.
Have you heard Elon's latest interview with Joe Rogan? Just came out.
Yeah. Yeah, I watched the whole thing. It was great.
Yeah. So Neuralink, you know, something that will be, you know, about for first generation, about an diameter,
Mm-hmm.
and cut out part of the skull and thread these microfibers to do what our neurons would normally be doing, where there's dysfunction, where somebody's lost functionality in the first stage.
Yeah.
And I mean, he gets into this completely, where if we all live these isolated experiences, and every time that there's birth and death, we have to begin at the same ground level of blank slate, right? Computers, AI, artificial intelligence, would not do that. Just look at our cloud networks.
No,
right?
Look
at how, the software, the algorithms like Google search, it's not going backwards in its ability to find something that you're looking for. It only has one direction, and that direction, as more and more data points come together. I mean, neural networks are mimicking what happens inside of our brain. It's just a collection of experiences that comes in from all different sources. Go ahead.
Really quick interjection though. You're talking about the AI like stacking upon itself, like boom, new machine download, boom, new machine download. You're a doctor, right? Great. What happens when it can't download? You know, what happens when it doesn't have that ability and it's got to start from scratch? You know, will it have the ability to start as like a child? Obviously, this thing will be learning very quickly.
But this is a distinction here between if it's cloud connected, right?
Yeah.
And cloud, we just mean some way that it's receiving, you know, a larger brain, essentially. If we look at, let's just use Google as an example here. If we just look at, they call it the knowledge graph, right? Google's whole premise was to organize the world's information. And so now it's become an intent engine, right? They don't care what medium you use, whether it's your voice, a picture, you know, a search query. They're not actually looking for the words that you type anymore. They're looking for the result that you're seeking. So it's the intention. It's what is your intent? What are you actually seeking there? And so Google is something that you could probably explain to us in a lot deeper levels, is an incredible network of intelligence and layers of information, faster and faster access. But then we are augmented. Our devices right here, they have the ability to tap into wirelessly, ta-da, and yet the screen still powers on. And it can pull up any information. But we used to have, you know, full keyboards that we were using, and we had 10 fingers to communicate with those devices. And now we use 2 thumbs for the most part. So the move, like you're saying, towards voice is much more natural. But the progression beyond voice is just being connected. Why do you need to even think it, right? Like the idea of Google Glass. And so as we look as a culture, as 7 billion humans on this planet, at what, you know, because AI is a very nebulous term. A lot of people talk about AI because it's a buzzword, and not actually making a distinction between a specific narrow AI like AlphaGo, right? DeepMind, the company that Google acquired that's doing some of the most advanced AI, that is a specific AI, and it's not actually that hard to do. Now, the fact that it beat one of the best people in Europe, and then within a year was able to beat the standing grand champion who won the last 19.
Are you talking about the backgammon or chess or what?
Go.
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah.
Go is considered to be the hardest game, period.
Yeah.
Play. The amount of potential moves is insane. And there's a great documentary on this. If you hop on, I think it's on Netflix. I just watched it the other day. And so all this is top of mind. And the guys were like, this is nothing. Like general intelligence, a calculator is specific. It's narrow intelligence. It's narrow computing power. You put in something and it gives you a formulaic outcome, but it's right every time. Right? So when you look back at the 50s and 60s when computers were starting to become a thing, it wasn't until they moved in the 70s to becoming more general purpose, where you could give it anything and it could spit out images. It could spit out new formulas. It can complex 3D modeling, which may not have been the 70s. I might be off on the time. Feel free to fact check that and go in and look. But the idea is computers really haven't been around, not even a century. And yet they went from being isolated, narrow, one vertical. This pen knows how to do one thing and do it well. That is write and or be a weapon and or a tool for leverage, right? But it knows how to do those specific things well, right? And so what's happening now is that in very short order, artificial intelligence, as we think of it right now, this is not artificial intelligence. This is a calculator. It's just doing massive calculations.
You're working the calculator.
What's that?
You're working the calculator just like you're working the pen.
Yes. But
can I add?
Yes. Now the next evolution and what it is that you're describing is that idea of sentience, the idea of a computing platform that's taking in all of the world's information and data using millions, billions, trillions of sensors, and then has immediate understanding and computational power, and then can model and predict into the future. That is the kind of AI that we're talking about on here. And none of us have seen it yet, but it will happen so fast. It will go from like, oh, this computer was able to beat the chess champion, to no one's ever, people were predicting it was going to be 10 to 15 years before the Go game would ever be beat by a computer. And yet the best person in the world got slaughtered 4-1. He did win one. He found a nice little shortcut.
It's like Doctor Strange scenario and the Infinity War to win. Right?
Yes.
No, what I say is I find a similarity, like you look at like mycelial networks underground and how basically they're like this internet, this cloud where all these chemicals and all these living organisms can communicate through this mycelial network. And I find it absolutely fascinating. And then, you have this mycelial network that communicates, that gets its food sources, and like everything has like these symbiotic relationships for the most part in nature. And sometimes, they're parasitic, or sometimes things go to war with other things because they're not, tit for tat theory takes place. If you don't know what that is, you should definitely look it up. Very interesting stuff. But these basic biological processes are really big governing forces, and you start getting into DNA and like what is like these are just essentially meat suits that our DNA is kind of housed in, and then you give off your your sperm and your egg and whatnot, and you make more offspring to do what? To eat food that plants put out there to perpetuate those plants. And I always wonder the question, like, who's really in control here? What's in control? Like, okay, we create an AI and it becomes self-aware or whatever, but who's in control? And it's like, I really think that nature's in control. Because a lot of times you look at our like gut biome, right? It's like you get someone that's like eating tons of sugar and whatnot, they're going to want more sugar. Or someone that's eating healthy, like there's this communication that's going on in there. You have nerve endings in your gut, you have neurons inside of your gut, right? It's like the secondary brain, or it could be the primal brain, right? Because we evolved from a gut, from having just a mouth and an anus and a gut to like feed. Just basic, without any, more sensory awareness than that. Swimming around in primordial soup, slowly developing eyes as, so we developed eyes so we could see, when we didn't have much of an atmosphere, we could actually, see the UV, and we dive lower so we would survive, and then eventually evolving out of that. But, you see like the oldest fossil record, you have mushrooms are like, what, 2-point-something billion years old? Or we just found a fossil like a couple of years ago, and it was a huge fucking deal. But this idea that we're in control is really, it's kind of funny to me, because we like to march around and we build stuff here and there and we're on the planet. But I mean, it's like we get a big earthquake and like everything's connected, especially like I always look at plants. They're that quiet and they're just like moving around in the wind, but they are so communicating on this crazy level. It's like this, it's like we have the autonomic nervous system on our bodies that just like automates everything. You get Wim Hof that can kind of hack into it, and you can start doing some, kind of superhuman stuff once you start getting into that. But it's like plants are always on that level. Plants are always communicating. Mycelium is always communicating. This whole network of chemistry, and energy moving from one place to the next. I mean, you look at Avatar and it's like the Gaia stuff where it's the planets connected. It's like that stuff is happening on in our world right now. Like, this is something we're just figuring out. Even when we have like some of the greatest technology, and we're talking about going to Mars, and like we have nuclear weapons, which, you know, can be used for good or bad, but like, it's crazy because we think we're so smart, and nature we're still discovering it, and it's always like steps ahead of us. So who's in control? You know, is nature creating an AI? Is nature creating the tools? Are we created out of nature? Are we, you know, it's this thing where it's this kind of like shifting and morphing thing where it's like, okay, yeah, we could blow up the planet. We might not do that. Or maybe we will all die off of COVID because of COVID mutating, or all this shit. But what's in control? And I really think it comes down to the microbiome that's within like the soil. It's within our guts. These basic things like DNA that come down, and they, you know, these are the blueprints. This is the code. And this code is what's dictating everything. It's just like a code will tell your, you know, that Tesla how to drive. You know, you take out the software and that Tesla's shit. Like, it doesn't even drive the same way. But when you put that software in, you get that software update, all of a sudden you got, you know, I forget, what's it called? Ballistic mode, suicide mode in the Teslas, where they drive like crazy. I don't know. I forget what it's called, but
ludicrous
mode. Ludicrous mode. Luda. God, I haven't heard any ludicrous music in a long time. But Groom the peace. No, but like, what is the governing body? And like, I think it's basic DNA in all species. And like, you talk about the cloud, and like, you know, our DNA stores that information. Like, if we've gotten sick or certain things have happened, it's this storage process. It's this cloud. And we pass it through one person to each other in our meat suits. And like, you look at bacteria, and they create all these different copies, and they keep perpetuating themselves. You know, that's a cloud in itself. It's a biological cloud, and it interacts with everything, you know, just like mushrooms putting out spores, like an actual cloud, and that cloud goes out, and then it connects back into the soil, and you have the mycelium talking to each other. I mean, the mycelium network allows trees to communicate with its seedlings and send nutrients. I mean, that's like that. Imagine if you could send someone power over the internet, you know, which actually they do. They actually, in, you know, my line of work as an electrician, you can actually do power over internet. You can do both. You can send data, and you can also send power, you know. We even talked about the
data that's actually giving the power. It's going through. It's just sending the electrical waves right through, sending the current through the same wires.
Yeah, a trippier one is fiber optic, because that's light, right? That's usually infrared light that goes through there. But what's interesting about it, they found that they can actually transmit power through light using fiber optic cable, which is it's some crazy. So you'd have to have some sort of, I guess, converter that converts the light into electrical energy. I don't exactly know the science. I haven't researched it.
The photovoltaic cell, right? It would be tough to get the efficient. Well, because fiber optic, how much light is actually lost in transmission?
That is called, oh man, I should know the word for this. That is called, what's it called? Shit, when you have the loss. God, what's it called? I forget what it's called. Oh, I'm tired. Had a good massage, and I should know that.
Hey, don't beat yourself up, man. You're doing great.
It depends. Well, if you're getting specific on it, but that's the thing. That's what's really interesting about it, is biological systems are so much more efficient than we are. I mean, they literally, you gotta understand, like quantum mechanics, like you have things like quantum tunneling. Your sense of smell would not exist without quantum mechanics. And I'm not saying because quantum mechanics makes the atoms and whatnot. It has this thing called, I think it's quantum tunneling, where electrons can basically transport themselves in a certain, God damn it, I'm forgetting these things. But anyway, your sense of smell has to do with, I think it's quantum tunneling. And basically this quantum effect allows you to have a sense of smell based on how your receptors work. And it's fascinating stuff. And so like, it's like fish, you know, that light up, or like bioluminescent algae. That's where we got these, is using these, you know, local signals light versus like just electricity through a filament, you know, making it red hot and making out of the right, you know, making it out of tungsten so it doesn't essentially burn up, right? LEDs use chemicals, and you put a charge through it, and it takes way less energy, but you get all that light out of it. It's just chemistry. And we got all those ideas from nature. You know, nature's already doing it way more efficient. Like, biology is incredible. But then it's like, what drives the biology? It's the DNA that's in there. It's tiny little bits. It's why viruses, when they come in, they're basically like inert, you know, chunks of stuff, but they go in and they insert their DNA into our own. And it's this whole catastrophe. The whole world shuts down because of the coronavirus. Like it's amazing, like what this small stuff can do. These little itty bitty pieces, you know, like Robin Williams would say, is the genie, itty bitty living space, you know. And to think that we're like, oh, I'm a human being. Ah. Tell that to a virus that's kicking your ass. Tell that to, you know, your DNA. You know, tell that to the basic building blocks, which all this stuff kind of emerged from. And like, it's fascinating. Like it's some mind blowing shit. And then I start to feel like I'm not in control anymore. And I realize that I never was. And I used to lay in my twin size bed and wonder where my brother was.
Just checking a pulse, huh?
That's a Mitch Hedberg bit for anyone who's listening. I used to lay in my twin size bed and wonder where my brother was. Rest in peace. That guy was a great comic. I love his stuff. God, he was great. Oh, so many good.
I mean, dude, I got a new journal. It's tiny. And
yeah,
I love it. I love it. And already we've got all this. All this.
Look at that.
And all this.
Look at that.
Just from what you've been sharing. There's a lot.
You know what's cool about that? Can I say something really quick?
No.
Going back to, I'm done. No, going back to like the depression stuff we were talking about. Maybe when you take yourself out of this big scope and you don't look at things that are so vast, and you look at something that's like more containable, and then you fill that up, just like you're filling up that journal. It's a pleasing thing, right? To have all that there. Like I saw it and like that made me like, I got dopamine rush. I'm like, oh, that's awesome. Look at all that. Look at what we've done. You know, look at this thing. That's what's crazy. Why people, babies are like, look at this thing. It's beautiful. And then the more you understand it, the more it grows, because that's a biological process and it happens anyway. But it's this whole like thing, and that is a metaphor. I think it's a beautiful thing, man. So I like that you got a smaller journal, is I guess what I'm trying to say. It makes me happy. Dude, this is looking so good. I love this. I love this shit, dude. Like, dude, you got it. Oh my God, you're like my forefather or something like that. I love it. Oh, dude, how long is that? Like, I mean, dude, you might be getting up there, man.
Longer than your hair.
That's impressive.
It's full-size beard now.
That's impressive, dude.
Thank you. So, man, what's coming up?
Go ahead.
Well,
go ahead.
What was really sticking out to me during that last, let's call it a rant. I feel like that was a great description, because it covered like a whole plethora.
Oh, yeah.
And so that last rant, the thing that stuck out to me, I wrote it down twice, maybe 3 times. Who's in control? I'm curious, what's your relationship with the concept of control?
I mean, do I start talking about my my sign? Being a Scorpio, I mean, we want to like. I mean, I could talk about control and that, like dark brooding. Yeah, control. I mean, we all like control in some aspect. We like control. That's the whole idea that like of survival, right? You want to control your environment. You want to have, you know, a certain level of this knowing that these patterns are gonna, you know, you have some safety, you have something like the good feeling, the whatever that is, whether you're not getting eaten by a saber-toothed tiger or you know, you're late, or like you're gonna move forward, and you feel that you don't. It's lack of constant worry, I guess. Lack of constant negativity.
Is control what
happens
with the lack of worry?
I feel like control is an ability to navigate things based on the patterns that you know. And control would be like succeeding in navigating through the patterns and what you would quantify success for yourself. So I guess that would be control. And it could be negative or positive, you know. But at the same time, it's understanding, like really asking, like, what is control? And like, I really went, you know, deep down the rabbit hole, and I started talking about like on a cellular, like DNA level, like you start bringing things down. I mean, it's like, well, what is control? You know, like what is what's running the show. Like, is it my DNA? Is it my cells? Is it my neurology? You know, am I pre-programmed to, you know, do this language that I've learned and like go through these responses based on my, you know, ancestors? Like, is there a predetermined path? Do I have control in changing that? Like, what is, like, it's the nature versus nurture debate. And it's always, you know, as we come along down that road, it's always a mixture of both. Just as much as I am me, I'm also a summation of my cells. And my cells, you know, if you take the mitochondria out of my cells, I don't have mitochondria. My cells are done. I'm dead. So my cells definitely allow me to do certain things, but also maybe I allow myself to do certain things. It's a circular street, you know, it's a circular path that you can go nature versus nurture. It's all combined. Like, it's control. I think it's a complicated question. It's complicated. You know, we can make it simple, but I think it's complicated if you really start picking it apart. Like, you know, well, I mean, yeah, you could.
But is it though? Can we run a quick experiment?
Go for it.
Alexa, what's the definition of control?
As a verb, control is usually defined as to exercise restraint or direction over, dominate, command. As a noun, control is usually defined as the act or power of controlling, regulation, domination, or command. For more, ask me to give you more definitions for control.
Give me more definitions for control, please.
I have an idea after you're done.
I guess it didn't like please.
Ask her who's in control.
Go ahead. Just use the trigger word.
I don't have Alexa. Alexa, who is in control?
This might answer your question. The cast of Control includes Sam Riley, Samantha Morton, Alexander Maria Lara, Joe Anderson.
It's a movie. It's a simulation.
And Craig Parkinson.
Exactly. The Bleeblar, it's the Bleeblarbs from Bleeblop, and they're running on their Squiblars and their Skim-Ups, you know, and that's how it's all done. And they, 1,000 years ago, they figured out they didn't need mathematics or science anymore. Now they use curmudgeon or whatever it is that they use in their alien technology. But yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
so if control through those definitions is something around exerting force. Something around, that's kind of what I took away from that is to control is your will or your decision or your energy to be overpowering something else. So for example, when you ask who's in control, right? Is it nature versus nurture? Is it us as these beings that think that we're so special, or is it really the cells that are inside of us, or is it the DNA? Right? That's the hard or the software programming, because epigenetics states that hey, whatever it is that's in our DNA does not mean that is how we turn out, period. It is a chance,
exactly,
an opportunity for us to select what genes to express.
But this is where it gets weird, right? So let's say, so if we can control the environment, if the environment dictates how the cells might be expressed, if we can control the environment to an extent, we can control the cells. All right. So now we're in control, right? But like you get things like mutation, random things occur, and there's this chance. And, I'm kind of getting an evolutionary theory here, but then things can change, and now you have a species of bird that has lost its wings on this volcanic island, but they are perfect at foraging. And for the next 2,000 years, they evolve, or 10,000 years, 100,000 years, they evolve, and they get better and better at it, and they become these big birds, and they're the apex predators. Meanwhile, they're sister birds that remain having flight, and they're still small. The other ones, the big ones that are, apex predators, are on this big giant volcanic island, right? And now they've gotten to the point where they can control all this stuff, and they're controlling what they eat, and they hunt, and now they have all this whole system in place. And they are basically apex predator. They are the dominating species on this continent of this volcanic island, right? Big Pangea type stuff. And there's little islands around it, but, you know, they're not that good swimmers, and there's big monster things that eat them, you know, if they go out there and swim. So they're very leery of that. Volcano erupts, right? Volcano erupts. It's like Pompeii, kills them all. But some of their sister birds that never got to that, chose to go down that evolutionary pathway, now they regain the, you know, flight, and they're able to fly a quarter mile out and go to these different islands. Now the story changes, and they start their own little journey, their own little trek. So as much as we want to be in control, and like we could, you know, engineer the most advanced human being out there, we have engineer superheroes. If the sun goes supernova, there's not much we can do. Or if a new virus comes out, you know, which is based off of DNA and biology, you know, aside from outside external factors, like that's another method of control. So who's in control? And it's like, I think you have a mixture of, you know, a little bit of intelligence, you know, coming to the fact intelligence, design, or society when you get to a certain point, basic like genetic primal traits, and then random chance. You know, I don't think it's just one thing. I think it's a mixture of all these factors, what creates control. And it can differentiate depending on the circumstance, and also depending on like, you know, in nature versus nurture, it can kind of fluctuate and go either way, you know, in my opinion. So that's why I think it's kind of complicated, because I don't think it's as simple as like just you know, a single definition, because that, like in nature, energy just changes hands, you know, it goes from one state to the next.
And so then energy is in control.
Well, based on black holes, maybe it's not, because if energy is you know, the laws of nature are changing, and energy is, you know, is actually being, you know, destroyed, or it's transferred somewhere else.
By definition, the laws don't change. It's just our observation of what we perceive as a law.
Well, yeah, of course. But like you're going into like what, you know, the fundamental laws of nature will change, because we're still discovering what nature is. But yeah, those laws will change and morph as we discover more through scientific process. But, and I ultimately think, yeah, obviously energy is in control, you know, it's the fundamental forces of nature, you know, it's the strong force, the weak force, electromagnetism, and gravity, you know, it's electrons, it's subatomic particles, you know, it's protons. They got a 14 billion year, you know, half-life, and then in 14 billion years, maybe I'm quoting the wrong number, maybe it's 4 trillion. But either way, it's a big ass number, but eventually those protons will decay into nothing. And then when that happens, okay, there's no matter in the observable universe, you know? And so then it's just basically these quarks and I think gluons that are bouncing into each other. So I don't know. He sent me a message. I can't see it. You know, one of my favorite, I love, like, one of the things I release, and I'm going to tell you this before I go, is the sequence. I remember like the Titans, that football movie, and like you show the team and they're like working through everything, and you got like a 2-minute like video montage where they're like doing all the stuff and they're training, and it's like a song, and by the time the song's done, it's like championship team, championship game, here we go. And it's like, that's how it is. It's a 2-minute song. Eye of the Tiger, done. There was a physicist. Anyway, there was a physicist that used to come to the hotel I used to work at, not naming names or places because I'm working on that. But anyway, he told me this quote, and it was one of the best things I've ever heard. And he says, it takes 20 years to have an overnight success. You know, and like that idea there is such a wonderful thing, because especially if you're having negative thoughts and you're worried about where you're going in life, you have to remember it takes 20 years to have an overnight success. So when you see people and you have like instant, like you can see people's Instagram thing and it's instant, and they're on the beach in Maui and they're doing this and that. It's like, you don't know what it took to get there. And you don't know if like they're, you know, broken in debt and like credit shed and like they're losing their life, or like it's all fake and it's photoshopped and those abs aren't even theirs, and, you know, blah, 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 blah. There's maybe some, you know, 16-year-old kid posting a photo that, you know, he found off of someone's phone that he jacked on the max. It's like, you don't know what's going on. So like, slow your roll and remember that good things take time, you know? Mm-hmm. Okay. It's okay. You know, and he had been working on a project for a super long time. And eventually it came to fruition. He's probably like when stuff came around, but like he took his time and he worked hard, and eventually it happened. And always happened that way for everybody, but like, just putting in the work and like doing it and doing it. Fuck, dude. Great. Like, that's awesome. He every day back to the same place and do the same thing. He did it I worked at the hotel for 6 years, and he did that same routine he did the same thing for 6 years, and they finally had a breakthrough. Same routine.
What was the breakthrough?
I can't tell you.
Okay, can you give us an idea of the context?
Okay, so it was basically with some lighting technology. I think it was fluorescent, or they were mixing some LED and fluorescent lights, you know. But he essentially, they had a breakthrough where it was essentially more efficient, you know. More efficient things are less energy use, power saving costs. If you have like a multi-billion-dollar like place, you have to put all these lights in. I mean, imagine replacing all the lights in like where we live in your city, you know, and you could replace all of them, and they're now a third more efficient. You're saving that much electrical energy, less fossil fuels. And it's a good thing. It's a good thing. So, but like I said, they worked and worked and worked and worked and worked. And they finally did their thing, and that's really cool. That was really cool seeing that. Good guy to talk to too, man. He printed me out a paper on the theory of relativity, and I actually have it. I always keep it with me. I have it on my wall. I always keep it with me, and I try to read it every once in a while to kind of recap. But yeah, it's a brief outline on the development of the theory of relativity by Professor Albert Einstein. And I remember him bringing this to me, So if you're out there, you know me, then I kept your stuff, buddy. So always in my thoughts. But I need to reach out to him.
You can say any names or anything that you want. Like just think about if they want to be spoken, right? Like I don't.
No, I'm gonna leave it out, and I'm gonna leave it out, and I'm gonna contact him, directly because I have his email, and I'm gonna write him a long letter. It's been a while since we chatted, but yeah, stuff. And then behind it, I have a paper that I put out. Thymic involution in aging. The size of the native T cell is governed from the thymus and not by replication. So that's kind of the first intro paragraph per sentence. But yeah, why age is associated with thymic atrophy, an important problem to be tackled. Anyway, but some of the fun stuff I like reading every once in a while,
Well, you'll have to dive us through what that looks like.
Another podcast. I need to read up on the material a little bit more, but yeah, aging is a really interesting thing, and it's something I'm fascinated with because if you look at the actual like mechanics of it, it should be possible to kind of end aging. But if you look at the societal prospect of that, like, what do you do when you have people that don't age anymore? How do you work with things like retirement? Like, what do you do? Like, what happens? What does that society look like? And, just like all the COVID vaccines that were going around and certain people were getting them and other people were, and then, people that were getting them seemed pretty readily available, it's like, like, is it going to be that way where it's like, unless you're rich, you're going to, only the rich live forever, or the people that have, the haves and the have nots, like what would be the requirement for you to, get to have that? What's the impact of that,
Separately from requirements of what it takes, because economies of scale in theoretically a free market environment, the more that, that we can add value at scale, the less it costs to do it. And I would love to dive into this on our next discussion because
I know. I mean, yeah.
Like Ray Kurzweil, he's coined the term human longevity escape velocity.
Yes.
And
I'm familiar.
That is the genesis of our next conversation.
Do it. Yeah. Escape velocity. Yeah. Human longevity, escape velocity. Let's do it. Cause I can do a little bit of reading up this next week and get Lee on it. And yeah, man, I'm for that. That would be great because I think that'll kind of take us to the, oh man, there's so many different pieces of that puzzle. So man, I could go on already.
Oh yes, absolutely. All right, brother. Well, is there anything that you'd like to say in closing or to recap or any thoughts that are coming up for you right now?
Gratitude for you setting this up, this podcast, this body, which is nice, this hat, which is nice too. But no, man, I think it's a good, solid podcast. Thanks for letting me rant. This is great. I love ranting.
You do. You're really good at it.
And thank you. You know what? Do you think? Thank you for your journals though, and writing this down. That is, I can't address how like much it's such a treat to have that, because those are such key points to be able to go back and then go especially when we're going through and have those journals to actually use those as anchor points to go back through all the media and content without. So kudos to you, man. Seriously. By the way, I'm that iceberg thing. So it's in the works.
What was the last thing you just said? You're still on like reddish, usually red Wi-Fi.
Sorry, iceberg tree.
Iceberg tree.
Iceberg tree doesn't do anything for you. Iceberg tree. Yeah, roots of the fruits. Iceberg tree.
Oh, the iceberg tree. Oh my goodness. I was like, dude, I am so lost here. Yes. Have you put any artistic energy behind that?
I have. It's very hard. Like it's like drawing crystals. Like it's very like you want to get it just right, because otherwise it's gonna look like a blob of something. And I want it to be very like defined and specific, you know. So yeah, no, it'll come together. But yeah, it's been an interesting project for sure. It's kind of so. But yeah, once it comes together, man, I think you'll dig it. But yeah, iceberg tree.
Iceberg tree. Oh my goodness.
Iceberg lettuce.
That's what I thought you were talking about. I'm like, what is this iceberg tree? Is this a metaphor? Like, what do you?
No, it's a tree.
Yes, yes it is.
That you eat, your dick gets 10 inches big, and then you die.
You lose all the blood from your brain.
Yeah, it becomes a weapon, and then you have to fight. I don't know. I don't fucking know, dude.
Oh, brother. Thank you so much for your energy, your focus, your fun, your gratitude, your appreciation. Thank you for teaching us your philosophies, your perspective, your awareness, the things that work for you, the things that haven't worked for you, the curiosities, the things that light you up. We are lamplighters, my friend, and that's what we do. We just give our energy, right? Shout out to your mom. What? We give what we want to get. And so we give blessings, we give gratitude, we give appreciation, right? Because everything goes up with appreciation. There's no downside with appreciation, right?
Don't think so, dude.
It can't.
Yeah, dude. Yeah. All right, man.
All right, brother.
Namaste, dude.
Namaste. Oh, can you do the little sound outro?
Oh yeah. Yeah, let's do a little sound outro. All right. Yeah. It's been a lovely day in the neighborhood. Stay classy, San Diego. Peace out. Later, dude. Live long.
Later, brother.
Later, man.